Welcome to You Are Here, podcast celebrating the life and music of Kevin Gilbert. Today we have Mark McCrite joining us. Mark McCrite's a multi-instrumentalist, resides in the LA area, and currently with the band Rocket Scientists. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you, Wayne?
Good, good. You have a very interesting story. We're going to get to that in a bit. There's a very, very good reason why I had Mark on for the first show, which we are entitling the Introductory special. But first, I want to tell you a little bit about what the show is going to be about. You Are Here is named after Kevin Gilbert's studio. He wrote You Are Here on the side of the studio. The studio is named Lawnmower and Garden Supplies. And it was kind of a home for everybody. Everyone who knew Kevin, they could go into Lawnmower, record, and sometimes just hang out. And it was like a home, wouldn't you say, Mark? I mean, every the times you were there?
Yeah.
I mean, it was magic there. So we're going to create some magic here on this show. We are constantly researching, we are constantly learning, and we are constantly updating everything involved with Kevin Gilbert's discography. From songwriting credits to musicians who were in the studio to just everything about his life from the time he was born until the untimely tragedy of his death. So what we are going to do is we're going to bring in guests like Mark and musicians who worked with him, people who were there, maybe even non-musicians. If you were a part of it, part of Kevin's life, we want to hear from you, and we have reached out. And we're going to have a bunch of these shows where you are going to be able to hear behind the scenes, interviews. We're going to hear in depth. We are not going to hold up on any of this. We are going to ask people to bring their A game. If they knew Kevin and they were in sessions with him, we are going to ask them to dig back deep into your memory. Think back. We are going to go ahead and delve deep into album tracks. We're going to go album by album and see what was the beef of everything. When we go into each album, we might pull up a track and just start listening to certain things. Let me pull one up for you, Mark, to hear.
Forget everything. Till I get her back. Till I get her back.
So that's a little sample of some of the beef we're going to get into there. What do you think about that?
That was pretty cool. It was really cool when you like solo up the vocals and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you know, I'm trying to like look at your reaction too, because
Well, that was part of the rock opera too at one point.
yes, and actually that version is from Thud 20th anniversary special, that one. And we'll get into the different versions, the different takes, the different usages that Kevin had, because he used one song here, he used it there, and he just tried it with a bunch of things. So we're going to get into that, but that's just a little sample of what we plan to give you. We're not just flipping on a switch, sitting on a couch, and pulling up a microphone and talking to buddies. We are researching this stuff. This is a real set right here. This isn't green screen. This is real. So we want to give you a little bit of what we have been doing for all these years. Take you in and around and behind the scenes and let you know how we formulate these releases, why certain things are able to be released and why certain things can't see the light of day. So that's basically what the show is. We are open for suggestion. We're always learning. Like I said, we're going to say things on here that we may mistakenly say. We may make errors here and there. Definitely correct us, but don't hold us to everything, because this is live. We're flying by the seat of our pants here. This has not been done for a Kevin Gilbert podcast. So that brings me to Mark McCrite. It's very it's very interesting that I have you for the very first show. And the reason why, I've been talking to you for the last few weeks, and we've been going over, how I wanted to do this show and what guests I'm going to have. And originally, Mark, I wanted you as probably like the fourth show in talking. But I bumped that up. And the reason being is because I think you have a very, very interesting story and very unique. You came into the world of Kevin Gilbert at an midpoint of his life, I would say, and then returned. And when your story really picks up is in the 90s, when Kevin was doing his solo work. So why don't you take us to the beginning of that? What, it starts in when? 80s?
Yeah, I mean, the way that I see it is that, when I first kind of started coming into the fold or got to actually know Kevin, it was all through Dave Kerzner, because he was someone that I went to music school with, and then he became acquainted with Kevin, and he knew that I was a fan and that kind of stuff, and just kind of started hanging out together. But there were a lot of little points that kind of, that I would experience him, or I would see this, this name or hear about this guy, throughout my life. Kevin and I went to UCLA at the same time.
Okay.
And so, my circle of friends was all either really into music or musicians and that kind of thing. And there were a lot of people from the Bay Area. And so there was several people from San Mateo, and a girl I was dating at the time was from Hillsborough, which is like a neighboring area. And she knew of Kevin.
Because Kevin was in San Mateo.
Yeah, he was in San Mateo at the time, and that's where he went to high school and all that kind of stuff. And so she would tell me about this guy that she knew who was incredibly talented, had music taste similar to mine. I mean, we were both like really into the prog music and Genesis and all of that kind of stuff. And, I'd heard about him from a couple of different people. And then one day we were walking through campus, and he's walking one way and we're walking the other. And she said, "Oh, Mark, this is my friend, and he works at the radio station, has a radio show." And I've never confirmed that was actually him, because I don't remember. I mean, it was just some guy that we ran into, and I was a freshman in college, and this is my girlfriend talking about some other guy, and I'm like, yeah, great, all right, cool. But I think back on it, and it's like it had to be him.
Yeah.
And then a little bit later, I'm reading Bam Magazine. I read about this band that put out the first independently released CD, because that was still back in the day when vinyl was pretty prevalent, and independent bands really didn't professionally do things. It was all about getting on a label. So I took note of that, and I actually did make a note that was Giraffe, but I had no correlation of that. And then when Toy Matinee came out, my friend Lana Lane told me about them. She had heard them on Mark and Brian. She said, you'd really like him. It's like the stuff that you and Eric are doing, where, it's got pop sensibilities, but a prog bass and this kind of thing. You should really check it out.
Eric Norlander, you're talking about?
Eric Norlander, and Lana Lane's his wife.
Right.
And so,
and they're in the band Rocket Scientists.
Eric is in the band Rocket Scientists, and then Lana Lane has her own project, and a lot of the same people, it's kind of a big family of Eric's stuff. But anyway, so I went out and I bought the Toy Matinee record, and it was awesome, and I played it for one of these friends of mine that was from San Mateo that I knew in UCLA, and she's listening to it, and she said, "Is this? Let me see that CD." And she picks it up and she looks at it. She's like, "Oh my God, it's Kevin Gilbert." I knew it. It's like I always knew that I would see him somewhere. His name in lights or whatever. And so that was where it all kind of fell together. And I was a big Toy Matinee fan, and I turned Dave on to Kevin's music, saying, "Hey, you got to check out this band Toy Matinee."
No, we're talking about David Kerzner.
Dave Kerzner, yeah.
And then.
Yeah, he was the thud keyboard player. Yeah. But before that, I remember Dave calling me because I had shown him the music, and, you know, we thought it was cool and that kind of thing. And Dave was really into collecting old keyboards, and he was hardcore into Genesis. That was what we bonded over, is collecting bootlegs of Peter Gabriel Genesis, Pink Floyd, UK, like that kind of stuff. But it was really the Peter Gabriel Genesis. I'd never actually seen video of Peter Gabriel singing with Genesis.
Okay.
So I went over to his place. I'm checking all that stuff out. So one day, Dave is selling a Mellotron in the Recycler, which was before the internet. That was a newspaper that came out every Thursday. And you check. Yes, exactly. And that's where you would sell stuff. And so Dave was selling it, and Kevin called him up. And he came over, and this is a story that you'd probably hear from Dave. I know I've heard him tell it on different shows. But he walks in, he looks around, he said, "Oh, we have to do the Lamb. We have to perform the Lamb." And I mean, mind you, this is like a total stranger. He doesn't know Dave or anything like that. But he saw the particular an Art Pro soloist,
all the vintage gear.
Yeah, an RMI, a Mellotron, this kind of organ. All
Kid in a
kind
candy
of stuff.
store.
Yeah, exactly. and so it was really cool when they actually did it. I never thought that would actually happen. But yeah, so I mean, that was kind of where I kept seeing his name, kept running into him. I guess the other really weird story is that I was really into Tori Amos when she first appeared on the scene. And so my wife and I decided we wanted to go see her, but she had already kind of had a buzz, and I'd missed out when the tickets went on sale, so the show was sold out. And so we were going to go, and I almost feel weird telling this story because it's
what venue was it at? What venue?
It was at the Roxy and in Hollywood. And so
what year about? What year?
I think it was 19 I was looking through my cassettes earlier because I bootlegged that show too, and it was on May 11th, 1992.
There you go.
It was right after we got back from our honeymoon because we got married in April.
Okay, so you were saying you feel weird about telling this story. Why?
Well, I felt weird because it's one of those things where I had this weird feeling that, like, I'll bet Kevin Gilbert's going to be at that show. And this is before I knew it. This is before I met him for real through Dave and that kind of stuff. I was a fan. I traded Toy Matinee stuff. I went and saw the show at the Roxy. I recorded the show, that kind of thing. But
you were into recording shows. You were someone who loved to go to concerts and to record them when it was available, and sometimes when it wasn't available to record.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And there were Goldmine magazine and the different kinds of places, and then eventually when I got on Prodigy and America Online, you started being able to network, but it was all sending cassette tapes.
Right, it was all
at this point
postage and relying on the men.
So anyway, I had this feeling. I just thought, this seems like the kind of thing that this guy would be into, because I knew enough about him that our tastes were very similar, and it just seemed like the kind of thing. So I made a tape of my band Rocket Scientist because we were working on something, and it was before our first record came out, and I wanted to ask him about how you go about making your first CD or making an independent CD. So I made a cassette. I had printed custom labels and stuff like that, stuck it in my back pocket, and we're trying to pick up scalp tickets to get in. And so my wife gets a ticket, but they only had one, and I said, well, you go on in, I'll walk around and see what I can find. So she goes in, and then sure enough, couple minutes later, Kevin comes walking up, and I was like, I said, I can't believe this, because I just don't, those kind of things are pretty weird, and I feel strange.
LA's small, but not that. LA's small, but not that small.
Yeah, exactly. But so I went up to him and I said, "Are you Kevin Gilbert?" He said, "Yeah," and just kind of cautiously, and I said, "Well, I'm a big Giraffe fan," because I knew that it would be more meaningful to say Giraffe than Toy Matinee. And he looked at me and he's like, "How the hell have you heard of Giraffe?" And I said, well, I'm more into the prog kind of stuff. Air Dance is my favorite song, all this kind of stuff. And he was like, okay, well, that's cool. And I said, well, and at this point I get into sales mode, and I'm I'm like, hey, you really need to check this out. But it wasn't, it was really like, I have some questions as being in a prog band and wanting to release our own stuff, and I'd like for you to check this out and give me a call.
Yeah.
And of course, I never heard from him.
Nah, go figure, huh?
But that was a weird experience. And then where it gets even stranger is that after the show, I said, how are your seats? And Tracy said, oh, they were good. And she said, how are yours? I'm like, oh, I was pretty close. I feel bad because my seats were probably better than yours. She said, yeah, well, I ended up at an industry table, and guess who I sat by? And she sat by Kevin the whole night.
As fate would have it, right?
As fate would have it. And I said, well, did you talk to him? Did you? And she's like, no. She said, no, I just didn't feel right. Just thought, it was cool. I just kind of was, we interacted every once in a while, but she said it was cool because his jaw was like on the floor for the whole show. Good. He was really blown away by Tori.
Now, are you kind of lucky that you didn't get that seat? Because would that have been very awkward if, you give him the cassette and, just walk around and then all of a sudden he shows up and you're sitting next to each other and he's
going, like, here's this stalker guy,
right here next to me. He planned this,
Yeah, totally. I don't know. I wouldn't change how there are very few things looking back on all that I would change how things fell out, with one notable exception that I'm.
And then that does seem to be the case in a lot of things with how a lot of people fell into line with Kevin. I mean, Nick's story is similar with him, meeting him up in Big Bear or whatever. And,
right.
Just everyone has a unique experience. It seems. I mean, unless you met him in the studio. That's what,
Right.
If you met him somewhere else, it was just kind of, oh, you do that? Oh, you do that? Well, we can work together somehow. So let's see. So that's 92. When do you meet him with Dave Kerzner now, with your buddy, and meeting Kevin Gilbert now, the musician?
That was 94. So, Dave had gotten in, we talked all the time. And so, he'd call me up and say, yeah, that looks like Kevin Gilbert wants to put a band together, and he's got this record that he's done. And he was talking about Thud. And so then one night he called me up and he said, what are you doing right now? Which is
right now, this moment. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's like, well, Kevin's playing at Largo tonight, and I'm going to come up and play a couple of songs with him, and I can put you on the guest list. I'm like, oh, cool. So I had my DAT machine with me, which was cool.
Of course.
And of course, yeah. And my microphones. Actually, yeah. Here's my prop here. These are the famous microphones.
Beautiful. Love them.
And so anyway, I had all that stuff with me because I think I had been at a rehearsal the night before, something that I was trying to record on my own band, and so
bootlegging your own stuff, bootlegging your own.
Well, we'd record them and listen back to them, and that kind of thing, make critiques. But anyway, so I showed up at Largo, and Dave's sitting at a table, and we're talking, and Kevin was like back. I don't know if he was talking. I think he was talking to the sound engineer. And Peter Gabriel's Big Time is playing on the PA, and Kevin walks up, and he's it's at the part where gonna watch it grow, yeah, and Kevin's like singing it at the top of his voice, and walks up to us and starts talking, and it was like, I mean, you can hear Kevin singing Peter Gabriel stuff,
Yeah, that's cool.
And but we sat down, we talked for a while. It was cool. I enjoyed the show. I bootlegged the show, and there was a problem with the jack, and that tape did not come out.
And which show was that one?
This was a Largo show. Okay. So it was probably like September 94. I think we were looking through dates, because I went to see him again, like just a week or so later, because I think he was playing like every week at the time, like every Thursday night or something at Largo. Yeah. And so I went to see them again, and at that point I was just kind of going whenever he would go, and I showed him the DAT machine, and I was like, look, because I didn't want to be like put on the guest list talking to him and everything, and then like not being cool. So I showed it to him, and he said, oh, cool. Yeah. I'd love to get a copy. Just whenever you record, I don't mind, but just give me a copy.
Oh yeah, definitely. And you did give him a copy. I have it.
Yeah.
Actually, I wasn't prepared for that, but yeah, you did give him a copy. It's right here. The DAT that you gave him that copy to. You can't really see it, but here's your DATs. And in fact, you sent me a stack of DATs to transfer and add to the archives. So
that's probably the copy that I made to give.
Yeah.
The original of what I gave to him, but I mean, so they'll digitally be the same, but I have a bunch of crap like laying around, odds and ends stuck at the end of other tapes, and so I thought I'd let you go through them and see what you can find.
No, I appreciate it. And so when did you let him know that you were the guy from Tori Amos?
I honestly don't remember, but I can imagine that wouldn't have been one of the first things I talked about when he sat down and was talking.
So it wasn't it wasn't any like, get away from me, he's kid,
No.
Okay, good.
No, in fact, well, I had actually talked to him about something else at that point, because I finally decided I really just want to talk to this guy after he didn't call after the Tori Amos show. So when he came over and talked to Dave, I called Dave and was saying, look, I really would just like to ask him some questions and stuff. So, I'll be totally upfront about it and everything, but can you give me his phone number? And he gave me his phone number, and I called him one day. I was on the way into work, and it was one of the days where he was on the Mark and Brian show. It was the one where he played Best Laid Plans. And I was like, okay, I got to call this guy. So I called him, and we talked for 30 minutes or so. So at that point, I mean, I don't think I mentioned the Tori Amos thing then, but we talked for a while. And so that was like how he remembered me when we met at Largo.
That's cool.
Was from that conversation, and he was just totally cool. He gave me information. He's like, I use this company. There's 2 or 3 other places you can go, and
wow.
He talked about the process of making a glass master and all of this kind of stuff. And
so people, just in case some people are new to Kevin Gilbert, back in 1988, his band Giraffe released an independent CD, and it is touted as being the first independent CD released in the world. So that's what you were initially referencing everything to. You wanted to talk to him so that you could figure out, how did you do that in 1988? Because I want to do it now. Yeah,
exactly. And it was only I guess that was in 90. Yeah, it would have been 92. So,
So you show them the equipment. Now you start recording these shows. What do you do when you're recording these shows? Because if it weren't for you, today I've been going back and forth through all of the recorded shows of Kevin Gilbert, and you are responsible for, and I'm not pointing a finger at you, I'm saying thank you. You are responsible for almost half of them.
Yeah. I mean, that was what I was into. And
thankfully
I had other friends that were, because once Toy Matinee hit, there were plenty of people that showed up on the scene. And, so I had some friends that I would trade stuff with, and they had Kevin showing up on Stone Trek, which was a radio show on KLOS and in the Bay Area. And he was on that a few times. There were other people who recorded the first Mark and Brian show before I was aware of him. And then from then on, I was setting up my DAT machine and
you were prepped
recording Mark and Brian. Yeah, I was on it. I'm pretty sure that whenever you get a copy of that Mark Bonilla and Kevin Gilbert co-hosting the Mark and Brian show, that probably came from my source, because I recorded that stuff all. Actually, I was gone, so I wanted.
I would imagine definitely
6 hours. So I put it on a hi-fi VHS tape, and then I transferred it right to DAT. But I went through the preamps and the mixing board and everything, and had clean fades and all that kind of stuff, and eventually cleaned it up for putting it on a CD just to finally archive it. And usually the tracks are split up the way that I split them up. and fade out whenever they play like a full song or when they go to a commercial or something like that.
We're definitely fortunate for someone like you, because I'm a similar person where growing up, I would record stuff off of the radio or what have you with the highest equipment possible, always searching for the best fidelity, because you want to listen to it back and you want to listen to it back 400 times after. So you want that good quality. The funny thing is, you had the capabilities to do it. All of these shows that you're talking about, Mark and Brian, when he would come in, and Kevin would almost always bring in some new music because he wanted to hear it. He wanted to record it. He wanted to hear it compressed over the air and how it sounded and stuff like that. So
that's why he put Kashmir. That's why he brought that.
And so another thank you, because, and this show is just going to be thanking you, because you have provided a point of history. Kashmir, when that came out, for people that don't know, Kashmir was released after Thud was released. So Thud was released, and Kevin tried to put Kashmir on the Led Zeppelin tribute CD, and it got rejected. And so he was appearing on Mark and Brian. He brought that in. He mixed it the night before, remixed it, and he brought it into the studio for Mark and Brian when the Thud band was in there to play. Mark and Brian played it, and that just sent Kevin on another trajectory in the Los Angeles area. And what happened was, once they played Kashmir, that day they started playing it every couple of hours. People just kept calling up saying, "Who is that? Where can I get that?" So what ended up happening was, PRA Records, Kevin's label at the time, ended up making an EP and slapping a special EP on the top of Thud and repackaging it and putting it back out there. Well, all of us fans who bought it the first time had to go and buy it the second time to get Kashmir. But the good thing is, because of you, we were able to hear something like this.
We sampled for you a couple of 3 weeks ago the Zeppelin tribute album. And as it turns out, Kevin, the boys here, they were jerking around with a version of Kashmir.
Which, by the way, there is no version of Kashmir on the Zeppelin tribute, which is, how can you do a Zeppelin tribute without Kashmir?
And they brought it. We did a version of it real quick a couple months ago. Actually, Corky James, who was playing guitar with me at the time, came up with the end section, and I had the beginning section laying around, and we went, "Hey, let's stick these together and do a Kashmir cover." Have you got that ready, Rita?
So,
all right.
Rita's queuing it up, but I did a rough mix last night just because I thought, this may be the only chance it ever gets on the radio.
Cool.
And it should have been on there, man.
All right, you got that Kashmir ready? Okay. All right, here now, and we'll do a bit of it. Here
the rough mix of the Kashmir that didn't make the record.
See, that's Kevin. He's got to come in and say, rough. It's going to sound great.
Oh, wow.
Whoa, man.
Jeez,
hey,
Kev.
Man. Hey, man.
Jeez, Kev.
They didn't have room.
On the tribute album.
They didn't have room on it.
Oh, man. Can we keep that and play it for our show?
It's yours,
Get this. During that, Rita answered the phone. Kerry Kurlop, the program director of the station, called up. And though he'll probably never play anything from Thud.
Is that what he said?
No. But he wants that so he can add it to the playlist. He's going to play that.
Sure. He's welcome to it. I thought I'd never get to hear it on the radio.
There he is. He thought he'd never get to hear it on the radio. So the cool thing is, because you recorded that from the radio, we all get to hear it. So
I gotta give some props though. I was out of town when that broadcast happened, and so I gave my DAT machine to my buddy Brandon, and Brandon recorded that.
Well,
so
buddy Brandon did the deed.
Yeah, so that was him, but I set it all up and had it. In fact, I think I called him from Holland, like, "Did you get it?"
So it was all international and stuff like that.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So I mean, you recorded this stuff and you had the sense of mind to do it, though. That's what I'm saying. A lot of fans, would just listen to the radio. I'm driving around listening to it, going, "God, I wish I could record this." So if it weren't for you, I would just have that one memory. And I mean, and you talked about earlier when he went into Mark and Brian, he just showed up one day and I believe he just showed up and he brought in Best Laid Plans.
Yeah, that was the day that
he showed up at like 9:30 or something in the morning, right? Something, and he just, and they were like, "Hey, we got a special guest here. Kevin Gilbert's in. He brought a song." And I remember just pulling over on the side of the road, listening to that, going, "Oh my gosh, please let there be a new album coming out." And that was probably about 92, 93, something around there, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, because it was before Thud.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
All right, so now take me to when you are recording. So now you go, your first one was what, Luna Park, and you messed that one up, right?
Right.
Okay, so I got to make, that's the one we don't have, Mark. Come on. Well, we do have it, I suppose, but we don't have it in your fidelity. And so now when you start going to these other shows, now you're coming along as the semi-official bootlegger.
Okay, wait.
Semi-official.
Here's where I got to show off. So I went to South by Southwest with him, and so that was where he got the first shipment of Thud CDs. So they hadn't actually seen it together with the artwork, with everything, and John got the first shipment. And then they were going to sell some of them and do like a signing at a local record store. I think it was Waterloo. And I think he did a radio thing before I got there.
And this was in March of 95.
This is in March of 95, yeah. In Austin. And so, yeah, he pulled one out and he signs Thud. And it says to Mark and Tracy, the official bootleggers of Thud.
That's awesome.
Thank you for all your help. So the thing is, though, he wrote to Mark, the official bootlegger of Thud, and I took it back. I'm like, my wife's gonna kill me. You got to add Tracy, and so he like adds Tracy, and he adds the bootleggers. So.
Oh, that's great. So, okay, so you are the official bootlegger, which is perfect. So now you go to these shows. The next show you go to, are you more in official capacity? Do you have prime spot at a table? Are you setting up your microphone? What are you doing?
These are small shows. I mean, no one really knew, this is before Thud came out, all of this stuff.
No one even knew the material.
Yeah, no one knew the material, and I think he said at one point they did Ballad of Jenny Ledge, and someone came up to him after and said, "You sound kind of like the guy from Toy Matinee."
Yeah,
that kind of thing. But and Largo's like a bar. It's tiny. Luna Park was really small. That was another place that I saw him. The Dragonfly is tiny. I mean, all of these places. So I mean, you're going to get a great seat. And I just, I'd have the machine like in my pocket and the cables running up the back of my shirt, and then the microphones clip onto the side of my glasses.
Now, did you still have to hide from security of the venues? Because even though the artist may allow it, certain venues don't.
I would never just carry stuff out and around. And I didn't want to be messing with stuff. I wanted to just kind of sit back and enjoy the show too.
Correct. So now you have your stuff all there. So are you just a statue?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're so I've done security for certain bands, and I'm the one who has to look for you, which in turn looks for me. But the best person to look for someone like you or me is the person who used to be you and me. So when I go and I have to look for these people who are taping or shooting video of any type or whatever like that, when there's a sea of rocking people in a concert and you see the one guy just standing there like that, that's usually your tip off. That's usually, especially the old days of that.
And sometimes they're wearing a hat or glass, like something where they can get the microphones in.
Especially in an outdoor venue in the summer, when you see someone bundled up to their ears, you see a big hat, you see all this stuff, what's going on.
There's this legendary guy named Mike Millard who bootlegged all of the Pink Floyd and Zeppelin and all the classic rock bands in the 70s. And I don't know if he used like got handicap seats and would show up in a wheelchair, but there were people who would do that with like reel-to-reel, like Nagra decks and stuff.
There's a guy who was based out of San Diego. I don't know if that's who you're talking about, but there was a guy yeah, based in San Diego, and he was notorious for being handicapped in the wheelchair area. He would get there first, set up spot, and he had all his equipment underneath. And basically, I mean, he had a full recording studio in his wheelchair because they wouldn't search him. And he has stuff that semi-fortunate that without him, there would be some of the music history gone. So it's a mixed bag. I can see both sides of it, and working on the side where certain artists don't want any of the recordings out. You know, I've been in that field where it's like, hey, I hate to tell you this, you know, patron, but I got to take your recording or something. You know, it's not my rule, but I have to enforce it.
Yeah. So, with the live stuff where it's like, this is a public display and a public performance, Kevin was okay with that stuff floating around.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And you know, the estate has taken a back seat to all of the trading of music and stuff like that. Only until recently have they tightened up on the YouTube restrictions and all that, only because fans want streaming, and that's the only way to do it in the estate's eyes, is to pull out all those revenues from YouTube and put it out the way the estate wants it. So I can see both sides of it. Now when you did these shows, which stand out? Like, do you have a favorite? I mean, I have a favorite venue, you know, like the Troubadour is always monumental, but the Mint or the Roxy, some intimate ones with nice backdrops, curtains, sound. Was there anything that Kevin performed, or was there something that you just took from it that you just thought, you know what, I'm always going to think about that show?
Wow. I think Luna Park is probably the one that I really liked. That club, you know, they had a big upstairs and they had a little downstairs, and Kevin would play acoustically in the little downstairs area.
He liked that place too.
Yeah, it's funny, it seems when I looked over like all the stuff that I'd recorded, and you know, you were talking about it earlier, it really seems like I saw him more times than that, and I definitely wouldn't have seen him and not recorded him.
Wow.
So it's like, because I know I saw him at Largo a couple of times, and I don't. There's a video of a Largo show, but that didn't come from me. And there's I think there was that live recording that I had that didn't come out. It was like basically you could barely hear something just below the noise floor, and I eventually just like recycled the DAT. I wonder if it could have been recycled with noise reduction tools or something.
Nowadays, yeah.
I mean, it was just like the other performances. It was the same acoustic set that he did, where he called Dave up for 2 songs, and they did Leaving Miss Broadway and, you know, stuff from Thud and Jenny Ledge. And
during those shows, we should probably tell the audience, they weren't full band shows. They were Kevin Gilbert, and if it wasn't just him up there with an acoustic guitar, he had a tambourine on his foot that he would hit against his ankle. And if it wasn't him doing that, he would invite also Corky James to play guitar, and then at times Dave Kerzner. So it wasn't like just a full band at that time. It was just Kevin Gilbert with occasional friends joining on stage.
Yeah, and I think the ones, I don't remember if Corky was there the first show that I saw him. I think it was just Kevin, and then Dave would always come up and play Jenny Ledge and T for One.
T for One, yes.
And it was both on the Wurlitzer. Then but the Luna Park one is the one that sticks out to me, partially because of the performance, partially because of the venue. But the cool thing was that was when Julian Lennon showed up. And he didn't perform with him, but it was a really memorable evening.
Now, Julian Lennon has a little bit of history previous to this. He sang backup on Toy Matinee, Turn It On Salvador.
Turn It On Salvador, right?
Yeah, he sang. You can hear him prominently on that. So there's a little bit of history on that. So what happened at that show?
Well, we were outside talking. I was talking with Dave and Corky, and my wife was there, Tracy, and then Kevin walked up, and Tracy had never seen Kevin with short hair, and Kevin came up and just immediately was talking like a million miles a minute, and just like, and she's looking at me like, who the hell is this guy? And I'm like, that's him. And so we talked for a while, and he was like, obsessing over the name of the band. He's like, hey, we're going to call it Band. What do you think?
Yeah.
What do you think? It didn't even jump into my head that like, well, there's already a band called The Band, but whatever. But so then Julian Lennon came, and he introduced him, and I don't really remember the conversation at that point. Honestly, I'm a pretty big Julian Lennon fan, so that was a cool thing.
Was it? No, Julian's right there, and you knew it was Julian?
It was Julian, and he was with someone else that was obviously like in that circle. Maybe it was, I don't know who it would have been, someone in Julian's circle or Kevin's or both.
Okay.
But, so we talked for a while, then we went in, saw the show, and Julian, we sat down like front and center, like right there on the stage, and Kevin and Corky are up there, and Dave was sitting with us because he didn't come up until several songs into the set, and then Julian came in and he sat down like right next to us. And so I thought, wow, that's really cool. And then the show starts, and Julian is like, he's probably had a few drinks, and he's really loud, and I'm like, as a bootlegger, you're like, it's like always that guy, who's like totally loud, is going to stand right by me. And you
just want to separate. You always just want to separate. And no matter what you do, there's always that person. And no matter what, they almost always, that's the one who turns to you and has to be in your face. That's usually that guy.
Yeah, so it's like I'm torn because it's really fun sitting next to Julian Lennon, but on the other hand, he's going to ruin my recording, and this is a good one. So anyway, actually, I think we've got some audio of that, right?
Yeah, you want to hear it now? Let's see.
Yeah, play the not the song, but the bits. So this is like what I was hearing, and I was like, oh, great.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm having advice.
Your dear friend needs to come down just a little bit more to be on.
Cork.
Sorry about that.
Can we get the acoustic up some of the monitors over here?
Kevin, not sure about that second change into the...
See what happens when you invite your friends.
Hey, you want the truth or what?
Wow.
Yeah, so I mean, it was like loud. So anyway, I'm thinking, okay, is this going to just ruin the recording? And he actually wasn't like, he didn't like yell during most of the songs. There was one exception, and it was actually really cool. He was playing Joytown, and all of a sudden it hits me. There are some lyrics coming up, and I really want to like look over and see what Julie's reaction is. So yeah, play that.
All right, let's do that.
Lennon never has to sing a Paul McCartney song. They were living here in Joytown.
That's awesome.
So yeah, that was a moment. It felt like that was just like, it's like I can't believe I was there for that,
And see, that's another one of those moments that it's another kudos to you. If you weren't there recording that, you would have never captured that moment of time. So you would have never captured a John Lennon's son hearing a lyric about him and getting his response immediately.
Yeah, and on the tape that I gave Kevin, he made his own notes and stuff because I've seen the cover. Yeah, and he comments that like, oh, Julian Lennon's at that show.
Oh yeah, definitely. That's right here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Let's see if I can do a real time thing. Let's see.
Yeah, Corky and me acoustic, Julian Lennon and audience.
So yeah, that's pretty cool. But see, and that's it. And Kevin did that. He took these and he did listen back to him. Everything that was handed back to him, everything that was given to him, he did retain it. And he did listen to it, and he did make notes at times with it. Sometimes he would say, oh, I sound like crap here. Other times he would say, hey, this is good. And he did notes. I think there's a couple on here that he did some cool notes on that he liked the versions of that. And then he would go back and redo the songs or make them a different version for the live setting. So
that's like that. That's why I would record rehearsals. I mean, it's the same thing. You listen back and see what's working and what's not. And on the way home from South by Southwest, he asked me. He said, "So, you recorded the show. Give me the DAT machine and your headphones. I want to check it out." And so he took my stuff. He listened to it. And he listened to the whole show on the plane on the way home. And he walked back and gave me the stuff back. But that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that's that instant gratification. I was telling you and I have a similar story in how we met Kevin and stuff like that. I come from the photography side, and when I met him, I wanted to do photos for him or just of the show that I was at. So I went up to him and said, hey, do you mind if I take photos? He said, no, not at all. Just same thing like you. Let me see him after, you take them. So gave me all his contact information. I sent him to John Rubin, his manager. And when he received them, he called me and he said, thanks, these look great. Do you want to come to the next show? Very similar almost to your situation. And so I started to go to these shows, and there were photo passes there for me. And it was almost the same situation. But it's different from a photography sense because you're only seeing that and you're capturing that motion at that time. So there were times where when he invited me, I left my camera at home. And people have asked, do I regret it? No, because I was there to enjoy that show. I was there more of as a guest at that point, and so that was my journey. And very similar to yours, he also labeled me an official, the official Thud photographer.
That's great.
So,
did we ever figure out if we were ever at any of the same shows?
I think, well, in looking at the list, I got the list of shows in my prep here. And looking at the list, I mean, we were at a ton of these shows, especially the two Troubadour shows. You were at the June 1st and the October 26th Troubadour shows. The June 1st show is where the DVD was filmed. And what's funny is, I mean, I showed you, you don't have any photos with Kevin, but I do, of that last Troubadour show. And I showed you that picture and you said, yeah, but you had to have been standing probably about 10 feet away from me.
You're right. Yeah.
That's what totally. The weird thing, I mean, there's a bunch of these shows that I'm looking at. And I mean, did you go to the Coach House?
No, that
one. Oh, see? The Coach House.
Are you talking about the later Coach House?
The later Coach House. It was the week the day before the Troubadour, the last Troubadour show.
Yeah, no, I didn't go to that one. Dave had put me on the guest list for the Coach House show where he opened up for Radiohead in '94.
Oh, and I didn't go to that one. See,
and it's like it was one of those where Dave again called me and said yeah, we're opening for Radiohead tonight, and I was just like, really? And I think I had a video shoot that morning, and so I'd been up since 4 a.m. or whatever. And the Coach House is a 2-hour drive from my house. I was like, I can't do it.
Yeah, it's located in San Juan Capistrano, and it's a dinner theater. So they have these long tables there, and you sit there and you order dinner and you watch the show and stuff like that. So, but no, we've been at a lot of the same shows. We've been a lot of the same circles. We didn't meet until roughly about 2002 when you helped with the Claremont show. Well, the Shaming of the True show that Nick DiVirgilio did with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
You were singing backup, and that's when I first kind of started talking with you, and we kind of just had a meeting of the minds and kind of realized, wow, hey, you're over there and I've been over here and all this stuff. And so, and through the years, it's been cool because we've been able to exchange info and learn from each other and kind of just help each other's memories.
Fill in the gaps.
Yeah. And that's especially this week, we've been in contact. And I know you said, my world all evolves around Kevin because I'm doing a bunch of this work, and it only comes in when you delve into something. So it was pretty refreshing to jump into your memory this week, huh?
Yeah, I mean, I'd go out to the garage and look through stuff. There's still some things that I have that I haven't found, but yeah, I came across a folder that had like, newspaper clippings and stuff like that. In fact, just earlier today, I sent you one where it was a review.
Yes.
From I think it was from LA Weekly of the Dragonfly show, and they even mentioned the fact that there's like loud disco playing next door.
Yeah, because it was just like don't. Oh, you know what?
On my recording.
Yes, and so that brings me to the Dragonfly show. So I wanted to also give nod, because when you started taping, you taped in the very, I call it the 3 eras of Thud. The first era of Thud was Kevin by himself with Corky and Dave joining him on stage every once in a while. Right. Then there was the first touring Thud, or the first performance band of Thud, which was Toss Panos on drums, Dave Kerzner on keyboards, and Corky James on guitar. Mm-hmm. Then there was the full touring band of Thud, which Dave Kerzner, Corky wasn't there anymore. Dave Kerzner was, and Toss was gone. Nick was in, Russ. So you've been there through all of these incarnations. And the cool thing is, you bear witness to certain songs that never got played again.
Kevin? Right, like Shadow Self and I Want You, She's So Heavy and stuff like that. Yeah.
And since you mentioned Shadow Self, I'm going to play a little portion of it right now for people, because that's one of the biggest requests that Kevin got for live performances. Shadow Self. I can't tell you how many times I've been at a performance where he was at, and people were like, "Oh, we play Shadow Self, man," and he was never happy with the live performance. It just wasn't as bombastic as he wanted it. So, it got shelved to a certain degree at a certain point. But let's play a little bit from your recording. And once again, if it weren't for you, we wouldn't have this. So we have to say thanks, definitely. All right, let me cue this puppy up. A lot of feedback on stage on that one, huh? There was even a woman.
The sound was crappy in that club that night, and Kevin was really sick too.
Yeah, his throat was real congested.
And like after the show, he's like, sounded terrible.
But see, if it wasn't for you recording that, and honestly, the true test is when you put your headphones on and you listen to these. As I was getting the show ready and I was listening to all this stuff, having the headphones on and you start hearing bottles clinking in the background and people talking, it's so three-dimensional that your head just starts going, whoa, you start thinking you are in that room. So
that's how the microphones work. It's like there's a little bud and they would loop onto the glasses.
Yep.
So your head is in the middle.
Yeah.
And it has that, just the way that the sound is shaped around your head and the echoes and all of that kind of stuff. When you put on headphones,
oh my gosh,
just what I was hearing. So
yeah, you are there. And I mean,
those are really good microphones. It's a shame because there's a show, an earlier show from the Alligator Lounge, that I think the performance is really good. And I wasn't there for that one. But
you're like, if I had the equipment there, it would have been that much better. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually the Mint show, it's funny, I used the microphone, so it sounds amazing, but my DAT machine was in the shop, so that one I recorded to, like, it was still like a Sony Walkman Pro, so it sounded nice, but there's just an extra level of hiss and a little bit less three-dimensionality, and the tape ran out at the end of Smash.
Yeah, that's always the thing. When they're on,
the first time it was performed, too.
Oh, geez. And when you're on stage and you start seeing technical difficulties, a taper's mind is just, that's valuable tape going. That's valuable tape going. That's because all it is money. And then you don't want to do the dreaded tape flip in the middle of a song.
Right.
You always try to time it where I hope they don't go right into the middle of the next, or right into the next song, or I hope they don't blend it in, you talk. Yeah, definitely. But no, we are grateful for all that stuff that you gave. Now, how did this stuff get out there? How did you?
Like I said, he didn't have a problem with sharing live recordings.
So it was just like, hey, anybody want to hear it? Go for it. Cool.
Yeah, like people who had given me stuff, Toy Matinee radio shows and stuff. And I mean, I'm trading Genesis and Zeppelin and Pink Floyd and all that kind of stuff. There were certain King Crimson. There were certain bands that I just was really into.
Yeah, right on. All right, let's see.
Crowded House. Crowded House is actually probably my biggest obsession.
That was a big one that you did?
Yeah.
Used to do a lot of times. So what is your favorite musical passage or any era of Kevin, or is there any CD or anything that you just always got to have, or you go back to?
Yeah, it's interesting. I've got, it's like for I guess Caviar really is, I mean, that's my favorite project of his. Wow. It just kind of, for me, it just really, really took me by surprise. Cause I mean, I like a lot of different kinds of music, and just hearing that sort of Zappa artsiness and the sort of edgy Marilyn Manson kind of thing, but I think it was before Marilyn Manson.
Right.
It was so unexpected from him, but then you hear the character of Kevin and the complexity and just the way his brain worked, to hear his take on that, I thought was really amazing. Yes. And I mean, I had heard that he was, toward the end of his life, I had talked to someone and they said, yeah, he's like, he went to Europe and he said he was going to buy a rubber suit. And I was like, what? And he's got a punk band. And I was like, okay. And then, I saw, and then my friend Mike Kelly told me the whole thing about the Bugman, and it was like, okay, I get it. And when I finally heard it, it was just like, man, this was the next thing. This was like what he was working toward. And I really just kind of experiencing the music in real time and not like discovering it later, you kind of got a sense for what the progression was.
Exactly. And people think it's dark. People think it's dark, that he was in a dark place, but it wasn't a progression of darkness. The satire and the comedy was coming through. People don't understand that. They look at it 5 years later and 10 years later and 15 years later and go, wow, what the heck is that? It was a part of time right there, and he was capitalizing on that. And it was actually, he was ahead of it a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I heard of it. I heard it kind of like, the humor and the satire and that kind of thing. I heard it as very Zappa-esque, but also, reminded me a little bit of like almost like Soundgarden or something, like, sort of grungy elements. And it was just a really cool combination of stuff. So, I mean, that's really my favorite. Broken and Sultan of Brunei and Making Christy Cry. Those are probably my favorite tracks of his.
And that's very interesting that you say that, because that's not the norm when you talk about someone who is into the complete body of work of Kevin Gilbert. I would say most people would gravitate towards Toy Matinee or Selection, or actually Shaming of the True. That almost
Toy Matinee is too slick for me. When I say too slick for me, obviously I'm talking about in a relative sense.
Exactly.
In his body of work. I mean, it's Steely Dan is too slick for me, but Toy Matinee,
you need a little dirt.
Yeah, I really like it, but I think I hear a lot more of, Pat Leonard and a lot more of like just the Bill Bottrell and a lot of those kinds of things, which I'm into, but it's not the reason that I'm into Kevin. It's not the same thing. Because I mean, I really liked at that point, I said before, my favorite song was Air Dance of his for a long time. And that's like, the entertaining that super prog side. Right. And there's stuff on the rock opera that I love too, as well. I mean, Long Day's Life is, I'd say Air Dance, Long Day's Life, those Caviar songs, those are like my favorite songs of his. And Thud I feel really close to, just because that was when I was kind of around the most and I got to see it live so many times and that kind of thing. But yeah, it was clear that Kevin was kind of already moving in that direction and starting to think about the Caviar stuff, even like at the end of the Thud era.
Yeah, and what's very interesting is because, like I said, not only in our life about Kevin Gilbert that we parallel, but also in the music that we listen to of his. I love Caviar. Caviar is, and I've been touting that since the mid-90s, that it's genius to me. I thought it was fascinating, and it was along the lines of what I listen to. I don't come from the prog world. I don't listen to Genesis. I don't listen to Yes. I come from more of the rock, standard rock, and pop sense. So when I found Kevin's work, the proggish stuff was fascinating to me. And Air Dance from Giraffe is my favorite song of his. And so, which is funny because you say that too, but you're a prog head. So I tend to like the edge of prog, when prog touches pop and makes what Kevin made, because that seems to be what Kevin did. Kevin kind of built the flavor of it in and around and made it come out and shine. So when he did prog, I kind of like his version of prog because it has those pop sensibilities in it. He can't get the Burt Bacharach out of him. So it was always in him, and that's, I think, what I took from it, So it's funny because my favorite is Thud as an ultimate thing because of the era that I became friends with Kevin, and because of, taking photos of him, and my role with him until he died was going to be to help start a fan club and help bridge that distance between the fans and his work, so that he could figure out how to let people know how to get to the shows that only Mark McCrite was attending and recording. So, and he had John Rubin was managing all that, but that fan base, to tap into the fan base, and that's one of the things that I brought in, and I started to do stuff like this. I started to do, I don't know if you see this is a watch.
Oh yeah.
And so I did prototypes like this for him to hopefully start generating some type of fan club and merch sales and stuff like that, but it didn't take off because he passed away. So what's interesting is my life kept going with things, in that the stuff I was supposed to do with Kevin, I ended up doing with Nick DiVirgilio, and in essence working with the estate. And here we are now. So it's pretty interesting. Our lives do have that cross parallel with the Kevin world. And it seems like a lot of people who work with Kevin end up working with each other, even if they didn't work on projects together. Stan Cody from Giraffe has worked with everybody throughout the course of Kevin's life almost. And some people are meeting each other for the first time. So when Nick has performed Shaming of the True, a couple of times, and there's a bunch of different people from different eras, from Toy Matinee and Caviar and the Thud era. It's great to see because all these people are meeting for the first time at times, and it's a genuine bond, and it's really odd. It's I sit back, and sometimes when I'm taking photos of these events, I look back and I just kind of take it in and realize, wow, Kevin brought all of these people together and he didn't even know it. You know?
Yeah. Totally.
It's really strange in the Kevin Gilbert universe, or the world that revolves around Kevin, all this stuff. Now, when you were out doing all this stuff, did you sit him down and did you ask him about any of these songs, or were you able to pick his brain? Because that's always
every once in a while. Yeah, actually, I in fact, talking about Air Dance, I said I can't help but think every time I hear Air Dance and I hear that, you know, the bass note and the high piano part at the beginning, I said, it sounds like Eric Satie to me. Did you like it? Was that on purpose? And he was like, oh, no, I don't think so. It was like, all right, because it really sounds like that to me. And then, you know, just as a guitar player, I asked him, hey, could you show me your tuning and like how you do Goodness Gracious? And he like said, oh yeah. And he did it so quick, just like zing, 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 plays it. And I'm like, okay, thanks. And I totally didn't get it.
Exactly. He was a master tuner. He could tune on stage like that while he was talking.
Yeah.
It was insane.
And then I also asked about Waiting, and he's like, oh no, actually that one's in standard tuning. And he showed it to me, and I remembered that from when he showed me how to do it.
Yeah, it's always difficult though to, you know, when you become friends with people who you appreciate their music and stuff, it's always difficult to bridge that distance where you can comfortably talk about their past works, even though you just want to.
Yeah, I didn't want to be like, and that was weird because I didn't want to be the kind of person that's just like always looking to the past. You know, one of those fans that comes and says, "Why don't you ever play anything from whatever?" You know, and that was one reason that I was really into Caviar, because I was always trying to like, I was getting excited about the next thing, and so you know that was kind of where it left off for me. But yeah, I tried not to do that. Although I think I did embarrass myself a little bit in that when I called him up that one time and we had the conversation the day that he did the Mark and Brian thing, like the first phone call, he said, so, you know, I played this song on the radio, you know, what did you think? And it was the Best Laid Plans. And I said, well, it sounded a lot like Funeral for a Friend. And, you know, I liked it. I thought it was really cool, but it's probably not your best work. And it's just like, when I look back on that, it's like, man, the balls on this guy. I can't believe I did that.
Yes, that's awesome.
But it was partially motivated by the fact that just like that was the first time that I had heard it. I did think it was really cool, but you know, it was like, well, I want to be someone that, you know, when he asks me a question, I'm totally honest, and I'm not just like, you know, this fawning feeling like, oh, it's the greatest thing I've ever heard. And
that's definitely what he wanted, because even to today, talking to people from the 80s who knew him and stuff like that, and I tell them my story when I introduce myself and all that stuff. And when I tell them that, you know, Kevin liked my photos, he loved the photos, they often look at me shocked and go, wow, Kevin didn't like photos of himself. So for him to like photos of himself, he must have really liked how you captured them. And you know, that's true, I guess.
And I also finally asked him about the cassette that I gave him. And I said, you know, so you listen to the Rocket Scientist stuff? What did you think? And he, initially I got feedback through Dave from Kevin, where he said, yeah, we were talking about it. And like, he said, he's really kind of vibed by how much vibrato you sing with. Like, you know, it's just like, oh, and it was like, which is funny because it's like the Viking vocals from Shadow Cell.
Right.
But it's like, and I really was thinking about it. And you know, Kevin did this whole thing where he was really studying vocals with Bill Bottrell for Toy Matinee and really tried to kind of craft a sound. And that was one of the things that he focused on, is that all of his favorite singers don't sing with vibrato. So I tried that on the next record, and it's like, I look back on that record and I hate it, because it's just like,
it's not
it
you.
It's like, well, the first one wasn't me because I was overdoing it at Eric's direction, and I was kind of imitating Eric and all of his favorite singers. And then the next time it was like, well, I wasn't going for anything. I was just kind of not trying to sing with vibrato. And then eventually I think I kind of found something, a vibe that I like, which is cool. But the other thing that he said was there's a lot of reverb. He said, whenever you want to use reverb, use compression instead, because it basically does the same thing, but it's cooler and it's more honest.
He always said reverb is evil.
Yeah, he said it's dishonest.
Yes.
That's what he said to me.
The evil reverb.
Yeah, so that's another thing that I've kind of taken away from that. It's like, yeah, it changed the way I think about reverb.
And, you know, every time I talk to someone and ask them what, you know, is there anything that you did take away from Kevin, whether it be something engineer-wise, lyric-wise, anything like that, there's so many unique things that come to mind. Like yours is the simplest of things, but it's unique because he referenced something with your music. So you've taken that and, you know, it's gone 25, almost 30 years now. So that's pretty amazing in and of itself. Okay, so let's see. We're almost to the end of the show. I wanted to take some time now and hit up a couple of things. The interesting thing is I've talked to you, Mark, where I'm going to have you help me out on a couple of shows in the future, and you're going to, whether you like it or not, come on and we're going to go through and look at some of this music, some of the stuff that we've talked about today, go through some album analysis. And I chose you, and that's why I wanted you to be on this the first show. I chose you because of your history and because of your music appreciation and because we're not on the same wavelength of music, because you like prog and I don't. I chose you because I want to bounce stuff back and forth. You know, I like it because of this. Why do you like it? And what was he trying to do here? Plus, you also have insight as to some of the stuff that was created, some of the music that was created back then, and just the timeline in and of itself. So that's going to be important. One of the things that we are going to do on this show, like I've been doing on this today's show, is highlight some of the music that maybe people weren't able to listen to because it wasn't released. Kevin didn't have time to see its end. And so what I wanted to do today and through other shows is go ahead and play some of the music that I think people would like to hear. And some of it is what the estate is going to release in the future, whether it's going to be a hard copy release or if it's going to be a digital only release. And those decisions are still being made. There's a lot of decisions that go on behind the scenes, and certain things can't be released just because legally, I mean, just certain people won't sign off on them, or we don't want to ask certain people because it's just going to open up a can of worms and stuff like that. But we are going through meticulously. We would love that word because that's what we do. So this, a caviar treat that people, you know what it is. I already told you what song I'm going to play on here. Yeah. We've talked about it before, but I think the fans would like to hear a little bit of this. So let's give them a quick snippet. Horizontalize, a caviar tune. That's an interesting. What do you think of that?
I like it. I mean, you know that I like caviar. So,
yeah,
it reminds me of a little bit of Single at times.
Has a cool bass vibe. Just keeps on jamming through. So we're gonna get to some tunes like that, and we're gonna premiere stuff that people didn't even think would be out and available. This is a treat in and of itself. I told you about this yesterday. Wizard.
Oh yeah, you showed me that
yes
box, but I haven't heard it.
This is called Wizard. And what it is, can you see that?
Yes.
This is the first known recording, I guess I should say semi-professional recording, of Kevin Gilbert in his first band, Wizard, 1977. So we've transferred this. We're probably not going to play. He would probably not want to play an entire track, so we will honor that. But we will give you a sample. So that brings us to the end of the introductory special, You Are Here. Once again, just to let you know, we are not going to have a show schedule. Shows are going to be uploaded to YouTube at will. We're working hard on these shows, months in preparation. Even though it doesn't look like it, this show took a lot of time to prepare. So we are going to go ahead and continue with what we're doing behind the scenes. Stay tuned. Stay tuned to KevinGilbert.com and also Facebook.com/official Kevin Gilbert. Make sure you're tuned into both of those for show updates. If you need to email in any questions or anything like that, info@KevinGilbert.com. Once again, it's info@KevinGilbert.com. Mark, I want to thank you. Do you have anything else that you want to throw in there? Anything last?
I don't think so. I mean, thank you. I thank you so much for having me, and I'm really honored to be a part of this. It's really a cool thing that you're doing for essentially for fans like me. I mean, I still consider myself first and foremost a fan, even though I did know Kevin. Yeah, this is just an awesome thing you're doing.
No, thank you for being a part of it. I mean, we've wanted to do something like this for a long time, but there were no viable ways to do it. And now, you know, we're in a situation where it was almost pushed on us because of the current climate, but now we needed time to do this, and time is what we have. So now that we have the time, fans are going to get it. So that's pretty cool. And that's pretty much it. So we'll see you next time you are here.